see, my guy is smiling. Um, First off, I want to say that I really appreciate you calling me a national expert because if you look at me, I don't look like an international expert. Abuja is very near and dear to my heart. It's because when I started my career, I started at PwC, and PwC is right on this road. And so as I was driving, when we were driving in yesterday, I just had memories of all of the things that I learned and has made me the person I am today. Much of it were learnt on this very road. I very early audited Central Bank, audited NDIC, worked with SEC, worked with PENCOM, audited PPL. Every single one of those companies were in Abuja. And so I came prepared for this Abuja one separately because I must not fall the hand of the city that brought me up. So 3 things got me excited, especially when Mr. Oladipo, my oga at the top, was describing those that are in the room. First is that we've got people from the university here. And as you can see on the screen, this is a business planning and corporate strategy training. So if there's any business plan related question that comes up that I don't know, we have university professors inside the room that will answer the question. The other thing is that we've got a lot of you said that you have finance expectations. Thankfully, we have people from BOI in the room. Any finance related question that is tough, because as I'm looking at your faces, you have tough finance questions that I don't have an answer to. The BOI people will do what? They will answer it for us. And then finally, it's that I walked into the room and I saw my very, 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 very top oga who is JC. And before I get started at all, I just want to say a big thank you to JC for, always being very supportive and bringing me on board for the project. We'll get started right away. I usually like to start my trainings by saying that I'm usually health and safety conscious. So there are 2 exits. You can either go out from here. There will be no emergency. But in the unlikely event of an emergency, there's an exit here and there's an exit there. If you want to use the washroom, just go right outside and then go up. You see the washrooms to your right. All right, Abuja, let's get started. What are we going to do? We've got 2 days of training. The first day, which is today, is not my favorite. Today, what we'll do is to go through all the theoretical parts of the questions that you may have. So what's business planning? What's corporate strategy? How do these 2 things fit into RECP and IE? What's a bankable plan? How do you write one? We'll do all of those today, and I promise you we'll get a lot of tools in our toolkit. But when we are done with that, tomorrow is the more exciting part. Tomorrow, I'll dress like this, my oga here. I might be in native or in even just round neck. It's fire for fire tomorrow because tomorrow will be a practical session. A lot of times you come to trainings like this, they inundate you with a lot of theoretical talks. This is what a business plan is. Here are the 5 steps to a business plan. You put all of those things before you get to, is it Garkina? There. Everything has disappeared from your head. What we'll do tomorrow is to try to help those things stick. And so we will sit in this same room tomorrow, God willing, and we will try our hands out at a case study. So every single person in this room would at least, try their hands out at a business plan. Now, I'll be honest with you. You don't write a business plan in a day. Talk less of writing a business plan in the few hours that we'll have together tomorrow. What we'll try, though, is to ensure that you attempt to touch every single part of a business plan. You do it in table groups. So I know people don't like to be put on the spot. So we'll group ourselves in, we'll put ourselves into groups tomorrow, and then we'll try to practicalize everything that we're going to learn today. The people that have been in my trainings know that I don't beg people to contribute. This is how I'll be pointing at you like this and say, Daddy, what is such and such? Mommy, what is such and such. So be prepared to volunteer yourself before I call you. All right, so what's our training objective? I know that, so for those of us that do not know, there will be two missions. The first one is the one we're doing now, and we'll be focused on business planning, we'll be focused on, corporate strategy, and as those things touch on RECP and IE. When we come back, by God's grace, in September or thereabouts, we'll focus on the real thing around finance. And I always like to say that bankers have a lot of secrets. Sometimes you walk into a bank and you say, I need 10 million naira. And they will look at you and say, we can only give you 5 million naira. How do they determine that it's 5 million and not 10 million? Why 5, not 7? Why 5, not 3? These people, they have secrets. But those secrets will reveal them to you during the finance session of the training. That will be in mission 2. A quick introduction about myself. I was going to study pharmacy, but I'm not half as smart as the engineers in this room. So they looked at me, looked at my result, and said, Oga, it's a Greek you will study. And in my mind, I'm like, how do I tell people the story later in life when they look at me and they say, but you wanted to do pharmacy and it's a Greek you did? I said, well, pharmacists save lives. Farmers, they give us food that save lives. So I would tell people that I went to school to study how to save lives. I won't say it's agriculture I studied, so at least that way you feel like I did something important. Not to say that agricultural economics is not important. It's critical, Abi. Thank you. The truth, though, is since I graduated, I've neither practiced as an agriculturist nor as an economist. But we'll find out today whether I've been saving lives or not. All right, so right after agricultural economics, I got into PwC, did PwC in Nigeria for a bit, did PwC in Qatar for a bit, and then I went to Canada, did my business school, went to business school in Canada, and right after that, I joined a bank in Canada, was doing environmental and social risk management, and at the moment, I work at a pension fund in Canada. And what I do, because people often ask me, okay, so, but what are you doing today? You've done Agric, you've done PwC, you've done ESRM. What are you doing today? In my role today, what I do is bridge the gap between the sustainability folks and the finance folks. So a lot of times, you've got these guys in sustainability who will talk about emissions, carbon emissions, and they will talk about, IE and RECP and all of those fancy sounding words. But they've got no clue about finance. You've got, on the other hand, the people in finance that can talk about controls, debit and mommy, for example. She knows everything about debit and credit and debit and balance sheet and income statement and cash flow. She can say it in her sleep. But when you ask her what is scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3 emissions, she will look at you and say, what are you talking about? So in my current role, I bridge the gap between those two teams because thankfully, even though I'm not a very smart person, I am slightly multilingual in my ability to speak both sustainability and finance. And so we will try to, the engineers in the room, don't worry, we'll try. I'll try my best to speak a bit of IE, RECP. The finance people and the business planning people in the room, don't worry, I'll try my best to speak business planning, corporate strategy, and all the financial terminologies. All right. The beautiful thing about Abuja was that when we came 18 months ago, we did not come into this city. And so what I would start out with is to try and level the playing field for us. For certain cities like Lagos, certain cities like Anambra, where we went to, and we had, we got into the introductory part of RECP and IE. What I'll do is to try and quickly level the playing field for all of us, and we'll just do a refresher from the trainings that we've done before. I promise you it's nothing difficult. We will get it. It's in fact what I've tried to do. Can you see me? What I've tried to do is to distill it into a few slides so that once we level the playing field, we enter, what's that express from the airport to inside now? By the way, By the way, why do you people run this fast in Abuja? I got on the airport road. It felt like I have just gotten down from the plane to enter another plane. The way the guy was matching the thing. Interestingly, I was in the car, was wondering why this guy was driving this fast, but only for me to see people going left and right like this. I'm like, these people trying to fly? Do we now have cars that fly? Like, kada, like let's do it small. I don't drive this fast. And I recalled, it was when I was now almost getting to the airport that I recalled that that's always been the case in Abuja. When I was, like, every time I would come here, and I haven't been back in a while, every time I would come here to work for PwC at the time, this is how cars would always fly. Kada. That's the right Hausa word, right? It's kada. I served in Zamfara State, so Kanajina was a kada. All right, so what is RECP and IEE? Like I told you, I'm not a very smart person. The arc that I have for learning things is that I like to break things down into their constituents. Because when you hear RECP and you hear IEE, it suddenly sounds like big words. In fact, by the time you hear resource efficiency and cleaner production, industrial energy efficiency, someone like me who is not very smart like the engineers in the room is lost. So what I typically try to do is to break words into their constituents. What do you mean by resource efficiency? First, it means that there are two words. There are resources, and there's a sense that this resource have to be used efficiently. But what sort of resources are we talking about? Are we talking about, suits? Are we talking about water? What kind of resources are we talking about? Well, when we talk about resource efficiency in this context, we're talking about water, we're talking about raw materials, we're talking about energy. So, okay, now we know that these are the kind of resources that we're talking about. What's the efficiency element to it? It means that we can use the resources in one of two ways. We can use it any way we like, or we can use the resources in an efficient manner. So resource efficiency, the first part of RECP, speaks to the efficient utilization of resources. There's big English on the screen. Don't worry about the big English. It says use of resources in a sustainable and cost-effective manner. The long and short is that there are resources we have to use, and we've got to use them. There's a way we can use them in an efficient and in a proper manner. That's the resource efficiency element. But in what context are we talking about this? That's why there's a cleaner production element to it. It means that we are talking about efficient utilization of resources in the context of production. Right? We are not just talking about the utilization of resources for utilization of resources' sake. We are talking about it specifically in the context of production. Again, why did we put cleaner in front of it? It means that you can produce in a dirty manner. And so when we talk about the utilization of resources for RECP, we are talking about utilizing resources in an efficient manner in the productivity context that is clean. Chicken. Right? Because when you see RECP, and you see, if you Google RECP, and you see the big English that comes out on Google, someone like me, is why they gave me agricultural economics. Because when you see the way they draw those molecules in pharmacy, they say this one cannot, this one. And so they gave me something like agric, where at least if I don't know anything, I would know I will know cutlass, I will know tractor. Once we got into tractor, I'm like, this thing is becoming hard because it's only engineers like this that understand what is happening in agriculture. It's why they even give me agricultural engineering. They gave me, in fact, what they gave me was agricultural science. I said, how can I play this thing up for it to sound like I'm doing something serious? So I tried. Now got into agricultural economics department. So that anytime I'm introducing myself, I will not be lying if I say what I studied was economics. I will say what I studied was economics. They will now open the book and say agricultural economics. I will say, is it not a branch of economics? What is the difference between someone that did macro and micro? Is it not still all economics? Exactly. So I usually throw away the agric in front of it, but I'm not one to lie to people like you. So I told you what I studied is agricultural economics. And the minute I was done with school and I could jackpot away from agricultural economics, I jackpot into PwC. I don't even know how they selected someone that is not as smart as me. There's something we used to say when I just joined PwC. We would say, you are maybe an unidentified recruitment error. But they kept getting promoted. So maybe they will eventually find out that I'm not a very smart person, but they did not find out till I resigned and I jackpot to business school. They still did not find out in business school till I jackpot into TD. Now I've jackpot into a pension fund. And now I've jackpot back to Abuja to come and train you folks. Anyway, so there's the other element to it. So industrial energy efficiency. Again, if you read what's on the board, reducing energy consumption per unit of output through better technology systems and operational practices in industrial facilities, I'm lost. 3 words again: industrial energy efficiency. It means that energy can either be used efficiently or inefficiently. And when we talk about the efficient utilization of energy in this context, we're talking about it from an industrial production context, right? And so don't forget, renewable resource efficiency and cleaner production, break it down into its constituent words, and then for industrial energy efficiency as well, break it down into its constituent words, and suddenly these things don't look as difficult as they sound. The one other thing I should speak about for RECP is that when we think about production, a lot of times we think about it from an output perspective. But with RECP focuses on the entire life cycle of production. And so it's right from the input. You'll see that it says, the cleaner production element says, not just end of pipe treatment, right? We're talking about everything through the production life cycle of a material. Okay, and what I did was to put a bit of, so we've got 5 sectors for this particular training. What I've done is to try to find examples for each of the sectors that we're going to touch on. And I'm taking the time here because when I did this in Lagos and Anambra last week, we sped through all of these because we had done the training before. But I'm trying to take a bit of time here so that, again, we all start on a level playing field. By the way, I told them in Anambra on Friday, was it, that clicker was not working. Mic was not working. And I told them that I am certain, the Abuja that I know, everything will work perfectly. Clicker is working in Abuja. Mic is working in Abuja. I'm a man of the spirit. I always know the things that will work well. For example, I told them in Lagos that I will get better engagement in Anambra. And we got there, even though mic was not working and clicker was non-existent. The engagement in Anambra was more. I haven't known, I've still not sensed whether the engagement will be better here. I'm still waiting. Exactly, we are just starting, right? So maybe by afternoon, I'll be able to gauge. In fact, before afternoon, I'll tell you whether the engagement will be better here or not. All right, so a quick RECP/IE example. Let's see, which sector should we talk about? Let's talk about textile, for example. When you think about efficient utilization of resource in textile, you can take, for textile production, you know that we use a lot of water to rinse during the dyeing process. Is there a way, for example, imagine that you used 100 liters, and permit me to use the anecdote. You use 100 liters for rinsing and washing 100 yards, for example. Is there a world where you can use that same 100 liters of water, right, to rinse 10 times the amount of, fabric because you're able to reuse the water? That's what RECP and IE is about. All right, so, but why should we care about this thing? You've spoken about RECP and you've spoken about IE. Why should we bother about it? Why is it important? Well, amongst many reasons, 4 reasons I have identified that RECP is important and IE is important in Nigeria. Number one, this one needs no explanation. The cost of raw materials, diesel, electricity has been on the up and up, right? And so that's impacting our bottom line. And in Nigeria, I said this the last time, that prices in Nigeria defy the law of gravity. The law of gravity says whatever goes up must come down. In Nigeria, when prices go up, they don't stay there, my brother. They keep going up. Nigeria's prices is the kind. So the other thing we know that defy the law of gravity is what? Airplanes. Airplanes are able to take off because ordinarily when you go up, you should come down. But even airplane that defy the law of gravity, when they take off, that's why when you look at your boarding pass, there is departure and what? Arrival. But in Nigeria, prices don't arrive back. When they depart from one particular location, they keep departing. And so all of this to say that because costs are rising, diesel prices, I believe, before I left the country was what? I don't know what it was. Now it's 1,002, 1,001, 1,000. The other thing in Nigeria as well is price of petrol in Abuja is different from the one in Kano. The one in Kano is different from the one in Lagos. The one in Lagos is different. Don't you just love the country? Right? And so all of this to say that we've got growing prices. Growing prices means that, well, our bottom line is being impacted. And so if there's a way for us to utilize the same resources in an efficient manner, we can reuse the same resources and still achieve the same amount of production, we better start thinking about it because of finance people like my mommy here. Because we want to keep our margins at the point where they are. Someone would say, but we do not necessarily need to keep our margins. We can actually just increase the price of our goods. Well, the other thing that does not respond to the law of gravity in Nigeria is salaries. When they've given you a salary range, it doesn't go up. It just refuses to go up. And so there is an affordability problem. And so if there's an affordability problem, there's just so much that you can increase the price of your goods and services. I learned that before, people will come and say, I love goat meat a lot, so I want to eat goat meat. Now, given the price of goat meat, people have moved from goat meat into fish. Like, you know what? I'm beginning to do fit farm. So let me eat fish. From fish, people have said, maybe it is egg that I'll be eating. Now, given the affordability challenge, people are beginning to say, maybe it's that I will eat. Plus egg, plus fish, plus meat. So what does that mean for the meat seller? What does that mean for the egg seller? What does that mean for the fish seller? In that same vein, what does that mean for our individual companies? It means that it is only to a certain degree that we can increase the price of our goods and services. At some point, we would have to look away from pricing to cost. We'll get there in a second, but the other thing I've realized is that every time we want to touch costs, so we say that we need cost efficiencies, the first place we go is salaries. And this is not a Nigerian concept. This is a global concept. It's why you are hearing about Microsoft laying off, and Amazon laying off, and Facebook laying off. Every time we think about cost efficiencies, it's our people we always think about letting go of. But it's interesting that at every AGM, when a CEO wants to talk about staff, listen to every CEO that I've encountered would always say this: our people are our greatest asset. How are the people the greatest assets? And you now take your greatest assets and chase them away. Why? It's because, well, we can't push up prices. We've got to reduce costs. And that cost, we have to find a way to reduce it. But the cost of diesel has refused to go down. The cost of our raw materials have refused to go down. Well, and you want to remain in. Exactly. So there has to be a way. The way is to say that the work that 5 people should do, maybe 3 people can do it. Actually, maybe 2.5. And when you say what's 2.5, maybe 2 strong people and 1 copper can do it. In fact, maybe it is 3 copper and 1 person. You see a lot of companies now saying that, no, we encourage interns. It's not like it's not from a developmental perspective. It's because, well, how much will interns charge you? In fact, we even have a practice in this part of the world that we don't pay. But what does that mean, though? What does that translate into? What that translates into is reduced quality of our products. It's either that or another way that we'll do it is that for the same price, we will reduce the quantity of the output that we are giving to people. Case in point, Gala. Gala was not lean like me before. Gala used to be a rubber. Gala now is leaner than I am. And it's more expensive than it used to be. All right, the point that we're making ultimately is that because of rising costs, we've got to think about RECP because there is a way for us to retain our people, for us to keep prices at the point where they are, but then still be able to have, relatively healthy margin. It's by utilizing our resources efficiently. All right, the other reason is that there's now increased environmental, requirements. When I talk about environmental requirement, people always think that it's limited to just compliance. But imagine that you turn on your TV to NTA. They've not changed that thing since I was a child. And from what I heard, it's still that same thing before they even gave birth to me at all. I don't know why they don't want to change it. Anyways, imagine you turn on your TV and maybe you like it, you like to eat from a certain big restaurant brand. Let's use Chicken Republic, for example. And then you hear that the environmental team went to Chicken Republic and they found out that across 10 branches that they visited, they use expired products and they use dirty water. And now they've been fined ₦1 billion. When you read that thing, what comes to your mind? Is it the fine or the fact that I still ate here yesterday? And in fact, I was planning to go there this evening as well. And as such, I will not go there. Thank you. Ever again. You. But in the news, they said they fined them now and they've changed your own is you will not even go there ever again. You would realize, therefore, that environmental compliance doesn't stop at the fine that you pay. The cost of environmental non-compliance extends into reputational risk and can lead to reduction in revenue. It can lead to losses in customers. It can lead to closure of the business altogether. And so that's the other reason why RECP and IE is important. There are environmental regulations. We need to meet those regulations. And so it's important for us, to prioritize RECP and IE. The third reason is that there's growing demand for greener supply from international buyers. In North America and Europe, there's a lot of focus on emissions and clean production and all of those. And what that's, causing is that there are 2 ways this is beginning to filter down into our environment. Number one is that providers of capital, so if you look at the banks now, not BOI is, do we have any commercial banker in the room? Okay, I can abuse them now. So a lot of the commercial banks, you'll see that they now have like an energy efficiency desk or a green something desk. The reason for that is because they've got international financiers, and these international financiers have emission goals, and they've got emission targets and all of those. And to meet their goals, they will say to the people that they deploy capital to, i.e. our banks, that you've also got to have emission goals and carbon targets and RECP goals. That's why most of our friends at the bank are now beginning to open, those desks. Or that is one reason why they open those desks now. So there is pressure from the international market for us to start, paying attention to this. The other reason is because some of our companies export outside the country. Well, there's something in the EU now called Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. What CBAM says is that if I import this bottle of water into a country in Europe, say, let's see, where do you like, ma? Netherlands. Mommy like Netherlands. I used to have pen pals in Netherlands when I was growing up I was in primary school, actually. I used to have pen pals. All right, so imagine that I import this thing into Netherlands. The CBAM rule says now that if the emissions attributable to the production of this thing in Netherlands would have been 10 tons of CO2e, but where you are importing it from, the emissions attributable to it is 13 tons of CO2e. We have to do a border adjustment. What that means is that you would have to pay for the amount over and above the emissions that you would have, emitted in Netherlands, because you are now importing emissions into the country. But how does that concern us? The way that concerns us is that, who do you think importers will go to now? It's the person in Nigeria, it's a person in Ghana, in Togo, who can produce this either at 10 tons of CO2e or lower. And so you suddenly open yourself up into a new market, or expand your market, or retain at least your market ownership outside the country, because you are able to produce at a level that is consistent with the requirements outside the country. If not, one or two things would happen. The person buying from you will start looking for an alternative, or that person will say that, Baba, I would have to pay an extra cost now, and so you've got to drop down your price. In this economy, in Nigeria, we don't drop price. And so that can lead to loss of market for you. And so that's why this RECP, to the extent that you're, exporting. But even if you're not exporting today, well, imagine that you're producing in a clean manner, you'll suddenly open yourself up to new markets, because there's a potential that these folks will come to you and say, we found that you produce in a clean fashion. We want to start buying from you. All right. The final one on the board is opportunity for green finance, right? Like, all of a sudden, we've got BOI in the room that is willing to provide capital to us at a cheap rate. If you go to the commercial bank today, how much do they charge us? 30% plus, right? But the product that we've brought to you here is at 10%. And so just because you're going to get involved in an RECP or IEE project, you get access to capital at a cheap rate. And it's not just BOI. We've got other institutions, internationally and even nationally, that have got desks like this that are willing to provide grants even, at a cheap rate. So why should you take loan at 30-something% when you can get the loan, the same financing, at 10% or less, just by, incorporating RECP and IE practices into your, operation? All right, I'll speed through this one. This is essentially saying that, remember that we spoke about the resources. We said it's energy, it's water, it's, and so all this is saying is that there are two sides to this coin. There is resource gap in the country. Make no mistake about that. 90 million Nigerians, according to the World Bank, are off-grid, meaning that they've got to produce their own electricity by themselves, or they don't use electricity at all. In the town that I served in Zamfara, it's called Gumi, we did not have power. In fact, we did not have pipe-borne water. You know, it's those things that they do, chukum, chukum, chukum. That's how we used to get water in that particular town, right? The 60 million Nigerians without access to pipe-borne water. I was one of those 60 million when I was in Guru. And then 32 million tons of solid waste produced by Nigerians annually. And this one is not just, production of waste is not the problem. It's that we don't even dispose the waste appropriately. One of the leading causes of flooding in our country is not just because of the physical risk of climate change, the exacerbating climate change, physical risk of climate change. It's just because we don't have appropriate disposal mechanisms. And so we don't have flood waterways or clear waterways for our waters to run through. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, though, is that where there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of opportunities. And so the chart on the other side of the board, on the right side of the board, is saying that, well, there's a host of opportunities in Nigerian sustainable finance market, in energy, in water, in agriculture, in transport, and in agriculture. And so even though there are resource gaps, there are opportunities today for us. So I did this study. By the way, it's interesting. I don't know if you know this. Those of us that read financial statements. The banks are declaring 1 trillion. How far now? 1 trillion. It's like they're doing 1 trillion. 1 trillion. You ask this bank, oh yeah, we just did about 1.2 trillion naira. You ask that other bank, yeah, we did 1.1 trillion naira. But I don't have a problem with that because all of us in this room, every time we do business, we want to make profit. So when I used to audit some of the banks in, I want to say 2013 or 2014, those banks would declare maybe 100 billion naira and it was a great year. But so it's not out of place that from 2014-15 to 2025, it's not out of place to declare 1 trillion naira. That's not the problem that I have. What I have a problem with, though, is every other sector of the economy is not declaring this kind of profit. So it looks like there's a mismatch here. The banks are supposed to be giving the companies and individuals loan, and then they generate interest income. So how are the banks declaring a lot of profit, but the companies that we are giving the loans to help to expand their businesses are either declaring losses or shutting down altogether? Well, we're not here to talk about the financial statement of banks. Part of it is cost of trading revenue. So there's a lot of exchange. They do daily tradings of FX. And because in Nigeria, anything that goes up continues to go up. So our FX is to the moon, right? So they're getting trading gains as well. That's part of why they're getting a lot of money. The other part is because, well, in a tight economy, people would want to access loans. And so you can charge them a lot more, interest rates. And because of that, the interest income will go up. It'll be interesting to see what their non-performing loans look like, though, what the provision for credit losses will look like. But we are not here to to dissect the financial statements of banks. What I did instead was to look at something called the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan. This plan was written in 2022, I believe. And what that plan attempted to do was to say, what are the highest emitting sectors in Nigeria? If we target the highest emitting sectors and we try to bring down the emissions in those sectors, we can then focus on those that are not too material. They identified that only 5 sectors in Nigeria are responsible for 65% of our emissions. Those 5 sectors: power, transport, oil and gas, cooking, and industry. Those of us in this room. What I then did was to take the financial statement of the banks. The banks usually have something called a sectoral analysis of their loan book, right? They would say, sometimes they even do a geographic, allocation of their loan book. They will say, these are the geopolitical zones that we gave money to. Or these are the sectors, this 10 billion naira that you see on our balance sheet, these are the sectors that we can break them into. And so I looked at it for the top 5 banks with the highest market capitalization. You can already guess what banks I'm talking about. It's weird though. It looks like it's the same industries that we say are the highest emitting. Those are the same industries that we've given the most money to. So how do we have a plan to reduce emissions in the top 5 sectors in the country, but it's the same industries that the banks are giving money to? Now, you say to me, Olu, are you saying that we shouldn't give money to these folks? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we have a plan to reduce emissions, when we deploy capital to these industries or to these sectors, we've got to ensure that we are deploying that money in a way that still helps to reduce emissions. Case in point, if you give money to an oil and gas company, the oil and gas industry, as you can imagine, is a big emitter. But Nigeria is an oil-based economy. We're top 10, highest producer of oil, so of crude. So what should we do? We should ensure that when the oil and gas company walks into our bank, we would say that, what plans do you have in place to reduce emissions before we give you this money? For example, at the production plant, do you have carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS, for example, so that when you flare, the carbon is captured and either stuck back into the ground? I'm saying that we should start lending money responsibly. Well, guess what? I looked into the sustainability reports of our banks as well. And what I found in there was corporate social responsibility. I don't know any Nigerian bank that has a net zero goal. I don't have any Nigerian bank that has, a net zero, a thoughtfully written climate action plan. So it means that we keep giving the same sectors that we say we want to reduce emissions. We keep giving them money without thinking about the emissions impact of that loan. But thank God for people from BOI. They are thinking about it responsibly. See, BOI can do no wrong in my eye in this training. Maybe I'll go to another training and I'll take BOI to the slaughterhouse. But in this particular training, BOI is the... All right, so we say that, listen, the commercial banks are not all bad people. Don't forget that they're in business to make money, like every single person here. Why should I deploy capital towards something that would not generate? Imagine you had 100 billion naira, for example. And I come to you and I say that, oh, please, I need 50 billion naira. But it's because I think the environment should be nicer. I want to stop emissions. Give me this 50 billion naira and I would only give you 2% returns. As a prudent financial person, wouldn't you look at me and say, you want the environment to be nice and I should give you 50 billion naira? When I can take that same money and put it in FGN bonds that is risk-free, and I'll get what's FGN bonds today? It's double digits, 12%. You see, mommy puts money inside FGN bonds and treasury bills. She called the rate straight from her head. She probably looked at FMDQ this morning before coming. She knows the rate. So I'm saying, and you're almost certain that FGN will pay you your money. In fact, that's why you call bonds like that, federal government bonds, risk-free. Because what's the worst that would happen? The worst that would happen is that, well, Nigeria doesn't have the money. He just calls up the CBN governor, prints money, and I'll give you your money. So why should I give you because you want the environment to look nice? Because there's something called emissions that is going into the atmosphere. How does that concern me? It means that every time we go and pitch, and if you don't take anything away from this training, take this away. Every time we go and pitch about an RECP or IE project, we've got to find the balance between value and values. When we always go there, we go there with values. We want the environment to look good. We want this one to do this. We want to reduce emission. But the capital provider isn't bothered about that. The capital provider is in business to make money. And so you've got to find a way to pitch not only your values, but what value the capital provider will get. We'll get into how to make that business case in the next section. But let's focus on what banks are doing today. So we've got a bunch of banks on the screen. We're beginning to do stuff in the space. So you've got Access Bank. They issued the first green bond in Nigeria, commercial green bond. By the way, federal government of Nigeria is the first. Nigeria was the first African country to issue a green bond. It was 10 billion naira. And what we wanted to do was to plant trees. A few years later, people went to the place where we claimed that we planted those trees. And just the mere fact that I used the word claim, it already suggests to you that when they got there, what they realized was that the community was even kind enough to give us free land because they bought into the dream of, greener Nigeria. We planted seeds that are not endemic to the community. What that means for some people like me who do not know too much English is that the seeds that they planted in the community are the kind of seeds that do not grow in that environment. So 10 billion naira went into the atmo, like carbon emi. It went into the ground. Exactly. Anyways, Access Bank did better. They issued a green bond in 2019 of 15 billion naira. They issued another one of $50 million, I think, in 2022. Sterling Bank even has something called green finance. They've got the green finance strategy under HERT. So they've got this strategy called HEART. What it means is we're focusing on 5 sectors: healthcare, education, agriculture, renewable energy, and transport. Someone is going to look at me though and say, Olu, wait a second. I'm seeing 15 billion naira, 10 billion naira. Like, how much are these? You see that bros now? He said, yes, so like, even in my own company, every month, we do 15 billion naira. So how are you saying that the entire pot for Sterling, and this 10 billion is not only renewable energy, there's healthcare there, there's agriculture, there is education, there's renewable energy, there's even transport inside the same 10 billion. By the way, you notice that I wrote announced. Don't even know whether we deployed it. And this Egbon is looking at me like, come on, guys, we do 15 billion in my own company every month. So the point is that while we're starting to catch up, there's still a massive financing gap. In fact, the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan that I mentioned to you earlier, that plan says that we need $10 billion every year to fix the emissions gap that we have in the country. 10 billion what? $10 billion every year. So I wrote a paper last year. I dug into what our budget was. Our budget last year, the amount that we earmarked for infrastructure altogether was about $900 million. Infrastructure. It means that even if we take the entire money dedicated to infrastructure, don't forget, infrastructure includes building road. It includes all those things. If we take the entire money dedicated to infrastructure and we stick it into climate finance, there's still a $9 billion gap. Don't forget, I said it's $10 billion. We need it every year. I haven't started. If we take our entire Nigeria budget, it's not good. Okay, so commercial banks are doing a bit of, work in the space. And then we've got government agencies. So we've got BOI who is, dedicated to this. They've got their solar energy fund alone is 6 billion naira. And they've got a ton of funds like that. They've got another one dedicated to this particular, program. We've got CBN. CBN has something called on-lending facilities. An on-lending facility is one where, the central bank doesn't give money to you and I. The central bank would create funds where what they would do is to give the money to a bank, and the bank would in turn give it to the end customer. That's why it's called on-lending. So, for example, the Commercial Agricultural Credit Scheme, CACS, is one example where what they've done is to say that we want to encourage commercial agriculture in the country. We will give this money to the banks. We've got very rigorous selection criteria. And then the banks, once you're a commercial agriculture farmer, you walk into the bank, you can access that loan at below market rates. In fact, I think it's 9%. Right. So the central bank has, there's something called a 250 billion Nestle fund. There's an agric fund and all of those. Development Bank of Nigeria also has stuff. The PFI on the board, by the way, is participating financial institutions. So how do we fix the issue, right? Think about the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan that I spoke about. Think about the resource gap that I spoke about. How do we fix it? I think that we have to take a strategic approach to solving the issue. We've got companies like ourselves who've got resource gap. There's macroeconomic issues, there are climate-related issues that we have to solve. But there are technologies today that we can use to solve the issue. So we should think about those technologies. On the other hand, for FI, financial institutions, companies like ourselves need more investment. So they've got to think about this from a strategic perspective, i.e., we can even make more than 1 trillion naira in profit. Someone corrected me in Lagos, it's just profit before tax, it's not profit after tax. Said, someone asked, what's more important, breathing in or breathing out? What's the difference? They're both important. If you can do 1 trillion in profit before tax, you can do more by expanding your product line into this particular space because companies are increasingly demanding for capital in the space. So rather than taking that 1 trillion naira and giving it to mommy that invests in FGM bonds and the bank bonds, we can actually take that money and give it to companies within this room to solve the issues they're facing. And at a system level, we need policies. In Nigeria, though, the problem usually is not a policy problem. The problem sometimes is not even an institutional problem. The problem is one of political will. And what did you say? Implementation. So I'll give you an example. There was the Fadama scheme. Fadama essentially is that we'll go into areas where they only grow plants once because they do not have all year round rainfall. And what we try to do is to give them irrigation technology so that they can plant all year round. All right, makes sense. We had Fadama 1, Fadama 2, Fadama 3, and at every point in the Fadama journey, what they were doing was to try and build on the lessons that they learned the last time. So, for example, Fadama 1 focused on just the farmers. And then after a while, the farmers said, well, there are few people who come into our farms, and destroy the crops and eat the crops because, they are herdsmen. And so what they did in Fadama 2 was to call the herdsmen as well and say, you know what, we can create grazing lands for you. And so they kept bringing people in, to make it better. Sometimes they'll say, we can't plant, we're planting, but the yield isn't great. Okay, can we give you fertilizers as well? And then they will learn that, our people really don't like, crops that are grown with fertilizers. Can we find, bio, sources of growing this crop? So they kept iterating. Well, there was one time the federal government approved deployment of money towards this project to a particular community. Let's say, for example, that the amount that was deployed was 10 billion naira. That money was traveling like this from Abuja and then coming into, it was Ogun State. No, Oyo State, actually. It was flying. And you know that it's about 55 minutes to fly from. And a lot can happen in 55 minutes. A lot can happen in 55 seconds, according to mommy that invests in FGM bonds. As the money was flying like this, the pilot took another route. Was flying, went from the 10 billion. Turbulence happened. Some entered into, water. The one that didn't enter into water, enter into fire. Long story short, how much do you think got to the farm, to Ibadan ultimately? Maybe when they got to Ibadan, they also said, we can't land in Ibadan because the runway wasn't too good. So let's go first to Lagos, land the plane there, and now take train. They say, oh no, they haven't built train that time. Let's take bus. How much do you think got to the farmers? I'll leave that to your imaginations. So the point is that at a systems level, it's also how we've spoken about this Nigerian energy transition plan. We've got a transition plan. We've got sectors that we're focused on. We say we need $10 billion, $10 billion every year to fix this challenge in just these sectors. Remember, the sectors only generate 65% of the emissions. There's still 35% that we are not even talking about, but that's fine. Let's focus on what we can control. For 41 years, ma. So the total capital need, actually, I'm willing to go into this. The total capital need is $1.6 trillion over a 40-year period. But we say that, well, based on our annual budget, business as usual, we think that annually, in any case, we would always get, over the 40-year period, we'll have 1.1 trillion. So that left a $410 billion gap. If you spread that across 41 years, because they wrote the plan in 2022 or in 2021, I believe, and our net zero goal is not till 2050, it's till 2060. So that left $410 billion spread over 41 years. $10 billion annually is what we should spend. But the situation is not only dire in Nigeria, it's a global issue. So, for example, it's usually estimated that we need between $2 to $5 trillion annually to fix the climate problem. That's tantamount to every company's profit, right? They should take 50% of every single company's profit and deploy it into climate change. That's the value of $5 trillion annually spending it into climate change. So don't worry, it's not just a Nigerian. The massive nature of the financing gap is not limited to Nigeria alone. So it's like saying Apple, Microsoft, every single company, take your profit every year, split it into two, and give it into climate change. We need $5 trillion annually. But in Nigeria, we say we need what? 10 billion alone. At 10 billion. Since we've written the plan, we haven't deployed $1 billion. But again, today we are not here to talk about the effectiveness of the energy transition plan. We are here to talk about RECP and how we will collect our own money. Share, no. All right. So, framework for assessing financing opportunities. We said for the financial institutions, they should think about this from a portfolio perspective, meaning that they've got to think about their entire portfolio and say how much of this should be given into green finance, what should be the mix. For the companies, they've got to think about it from both a project level assessment, and this project level assessment I find that companies are great at doing. A company will come and say, we want to do solar energy, and they will deploy capital towards that. The challenge usually is that we don't tie it back to the strategic direction of the company, right? So we just do piecemeal projects here and there that do not necessarily tie ultimately into the strategic plan of the company. By the time we take strategy and we mix it up with tactics, it leads to unlocked capital. Here's where we're going to land this particular plane, because plane that I fly, I find a way to land it. I'm not like that 10 billion that left Abuja and did not get to Ibadan. That entered turbulence. So where we landed the plane the last time is that there are different tools for raising capital. We said it goes from very cheap to very expensive. Grant, for example, this is my auntie that had 100 billion naira. She can say that, Olu, actually, you know what? I just like the environment. Any company that, has goals that are aligned with the environment, I will give them money and it's going to be free, right? And so she looks like a very generous person. So that 100 billion, she'll split it into two. 50 billion of it will go into grant, environmental issues, right? It can be that cheap, or it can be as expensive as equity, meaning that Oga Jesse that likes money will say, me, I would invest in your company and I'll own a part of it, right? And then in the middle is where you then have debt, right? That debt can be bonds, it can be corporate debt, or it can be project finance. Now, the difference between corporate debt and project finance is that one is recourse and the other is non-recourse. Remember, I'm not a very smart person. I don't like big grammar. A recourse debt simply means that when I borrow you the money, I have the right to come and take everything in your company if you do not pay me back my money. That's a recourse debt. It's recourse to the company. A non-recourse debt is one where, and that's project finance debt. If I borrow you the money for this particular project, the only thing I can lay claim to is the project for which you've borrowed the money, right? And so if the project disappears into thin air and you still have a viable company, I can't touch your company. It then goes without saying that it looks more expensive than corporate debt, right? Because I'm taking a lot more risk than the person who I can, who is recourse, who I can lay claim to other assets of the business. All right. And then we said there's equity where Mr. JC looks at my company, says, I believe in your dream, but give me 50% of your company, take a stake in the company. That's where we ended the conversation last time. So the people in Lagos and the people in Anambra, they cannot say that they have an edge over the people in Abuja because everything we taught them the last time, we've taught the group here now. I'll pause for 1 second, see if you have questions before we go into the reason why we are here, before we get into it. If you have questions, comments, the person that wants to give us 100 billion naira into grants, or mommy that likes FGN bonds, if there are comments or questions, I'll take them now before we fire on. Yeah. But you can just use mine as well.
It's on now. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Now, pepper in the tea is this. Some time ago, I was introduced to a peppered chocolate. I never imagined it that you can actually put pepper in your hot chocolate and it will be good. I tried it, and since then, I cannot say I'm addicted to it, but each time it is provided, I want to take it. Why are we saying this? We have companies, institutions, and organizations here. The first question you will want to ask yourself is, why are you here? Mr. Olu has kind of explained that. Why RECP? He has explained that. But if you go deeper into the conversation, and that's where he's going now, is that your company wants to, one, produce in a more efficient way because the laws, environmental laws and regulations are catching up with your company. You understand? Secondly, because of the rising costs of either production or energy, you are losing somewhere. But you love your business, you love the sector, you've been in there for about, let's say, 25 years, and you want to remain in the sector because you see the opportunities, isn't it? But these are your challenges. Now, government is coming and saying, you know what, Mr. XYZ, we know you are producing pencil or you are into furniture or textile or food processing, okay? But your emission and effluent in the last year has been going what? Up. Just because you want to meet market demand and you'll be producing in a way to meet your demand. Hence, you are what? Generating a lot of waste or using a lot of fuel. How will you beat down the government regulations? By optimizing your what? Operations. Get new technology, change some certain things, optimize your entire process, and get things running. Optimizing is not teeth. You agree? It's not by the grace of God. You will not go to church today and tell your pastor, my business is falling, or regulations are on me. Hence, pastor, pray for me so that Nezra should not seal my company. It doesn't work. No matter how best your pastor will pray, they will seal your company. You agree? So it comes down to meaning that you must optimize, isn't it? Because you must optimize, you need money. You need to buy new machines. You need to carry out what we call cleaner production assessments. Some of the times you need to buy some machines that will reduce your water emission, optimize your waste, or reduce your emission. Abi? Now, where do you get the money from? Is it from church? Hello? Is it from church? So, even BOI, when you get to BOI, there are certain questions that you will be asked. It's not everybody that walks into the police station will win the case. Definitely, you walk into the bank and you said, I want to do this. And bank will now be calling, give me collateral. What do you want to use the loan for? What is the return ROI of your what's the return investment on the loan we want to give you? We are giving you this loan at XY%. What's your equity? What's your cash flow? How many? Who did your business proposal for you? Who did this? Where are you getting the machine from? How long will the machine take? How many emissions are you cutting down? How many CO2? Water efficiency, product, output. Now there you're going to say kaki no be later. You get it? But you want to stay in business. And the reason why I'm putting this pepper in your tea is to kind of expose you to what will be coming now that Olu is coming into now. It's real business. You get it? This is not a talk show. Put your company in front of you. How many people, manufacturers? 1, 2, 3, 4. Which company, ma'am? Which product? Which sector? Agricultural processing. Textile and apparel. Sector, sir. Furniture. So you see, we have 4. I not see your organ office. Sir. Security, ink, production. You're dealing with chemicals. A lot of chemicals. There's what we call chemicalism. You are dealing with chemicals, you're dealing with soda ash, you're dealing with energy costs. Exactly. Madam, ma'am, you are doing processing, water, chemical, waste. You're using water, but you're using energy. So what Mr. Olu is trying to tell us today, and what I want us to start looking at, is everything you are going to do is money. You get it? How to get that money and how to meet government regulations is on the one hand. So how to get money first, how to meet government regulation, how to meet your demand production, how to even get your products to the market and at the same time make profits. So you see that the tea now is not just hot. It's not just hot. We are putting pepper into it. And we are seeing the benefits that, or discussions that we'll be having here today. So I want you to open your mind. Start thinking how you want to make money, how you want to save money, what will be necessary for you to make those processes. Is that clear, sir? Mr. Olusa, over to you. Thank you, sir.
See, JC.
Some high-level work indirectly that we will still get to. We'll get to that point at the appropriate time. So to enable us to maximize time, I think you should, on the lighter mode, don't give my... They are partners. And by strategic relationship that exists between us and the rules and regulations on ground, I don't think, I'm speaking now because I'm from man, because he made some statement about the fact that they're on your neck, they're on your back, in as much as we work hand in hand to ensure that we create a conducive environment. I don't think any of the regulators will operate in a manner that will frustrate or work against the operation of businesses. Things are changing in Nigeria. He's a Nigerian, but he's not spending bulk of his time in Nigeria. So things are changing. There's high level of information, interaction, even with the top level management of regulators. So I just feel it's expedient I mentioned that to us. Thank you. So our members, there's no need to be afraid of anything. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, sirs. This JC, this Dr. JC, by the way, is so great at this job. Why do we need to bring international experts into the con? And so they will now say, since Dr. JC, because Dr. JC is so versatile, he can do CPA, he can do IE, he can do RECP, he can do finance. They'll say, why do we even need to fly this guy all the way from Canada into the country? They will now say, well, that mission too that you're supposed to come for, don't bother again. JC spends a lot of time in Abuja. So that's the reason I won't give the mic to Dr. JC again. Because you see that mission too, that thing has already entered my yearly budget. So I've got to come back into the country. And I love Abuja. I love the city. By the way, you guys have to recommend a great place to go and eat. The last time I was here was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 years ago. There used to be this place. I can't remember. They sell Nigerian food. No. I'm saying they sell like, it's a massive, they have branches in Lagos. GEF-UNIDO. Are they still operational? Okay. Maybe I'll go. Is in Garki. So I think I'll go to GEF. But the food is always, you see me, the food is always taller than me. Is that still the same? Is this still the same case? Or what did you say? Hey, it's gala quality. This is my size is gala quality. All right, so we're going to get into, remember that the title of this particular training is Business Planning and Corporate Strategy. What I did was to level the playing field in the first session. And so now we'll get into how to build a business case. And that's what Jason was getting at. That ultimately, even if we know, we want to, deploy projects, we want to do all of those, how do we make our business case? And when I talk about making our business case, I'm saying to two categories of people. How do we make our business case to management? And then how do we make our business case to the banks where we'll get money? Because I find that more often than not, when we talk about making the business case, we always just keep the management segment of that business case, development. And you would not go to the bank to raise money if management is not in alignment with the project that you want to do. So, for example, in the same vein as I was describing earlier, you go and meet management and you say, we use too much energy, we should buy solar panels. We should switch over to solar panels. Management will say that, and if you know anything about solar, the upfront capital is usually significant. So management will say, okay, the money that we are managing at the moment, we should take that money and go and put it into solar panel. So how do you make the case to management that convinces them that this is the appropriate way, to go? Before we then get to the point where management says, let's prepare a business plan that our friends at BOI or whatever other funding partner it is we choose to go to them with. So that's the segment we're trying to get into. What I've done is to say that let's take those drivers, those RECP drivers. Remember that we spoke about 4 RECP drivers. The reason why RECP is important. Can we take each one of those drivers and try to build a business case around them, or at least use them as a mechanism for developing a business case? And so if we learn that mechanism, it's then easy for us to go to the bank or to our funding partners. So the first one, remember, is pricing. We said prices have gone up. And we say that when prices go up in this our environment, they never come down. But how do we make the case to our people? We would say that, well, lower production costs, you will lead to higher margins. And those higher margins will make our people happy. But you see, most times when we come to finance people and we say we want to increase our margins, not mommy, that's not what mommy does. When you go to meet the finance person and you say, hey, listen, our target margin is 10%, for example. Our margin at the moment is at 7%. This thing has to rise by fire, by force, back to 10%. Imagine that the gap that takes it back to 10% is 50 million naira, for just the sake of analogy. What the finance person will likely do is to go and look for costs that equates to 50 million and find a way for that cost to disappear from the income statement. Remember what we said, that what they will now likely do is to say, wait, the chief technology officer gets 50 million naira annually. If I remove this 50 million naira, the cost has balanced, the cost reduces, and now we can get back to 10%. They now think about it and say, in fact, my business case will be that this chief technology officer, he has 3 other staff now. There's one guy in that department. He looks like a rising star. He will know the work. So even if we chase this chief technology officer away, the business will still continue to operate. So what the finance person will then do is this is their own way of making business case. They will come and meet, the CEO and say, listen, I found a solution. We just need to let the CTO go. We've got this rising star in that department, and everything will get solved. Well, in my small years of experience, what I've noticed is that when you let that CTO go, you see that rising star that you say can do the work of a CTO. You know why experience is important when you let that CTO person go. Everything will now start to do like this. It will be turning on the... All right. Rising star will become a shooting star. The rising star will not rise again. It will become dying candle. But you see, the problem is when you now see that, okay, this decision that we took, you don't cast. But you now say, you know what, let's go and get a new CTO. But remember, yesterday's price is not today's price. When you go and look for a new CTO, that CTO will say, no, my own money is not 50 million naira. My own is 75 million. You bring the new CTO with 75 million naira. Margin has entered voicemail. Now, this CTO will do one of two things. The CTO will say, now the entire business is, going down. Let me try and fix the problem that our dying candle has raised. Fixes the problem 6 months in, sees that he has delivered value, and he will come back to you and say, because I have delivered value now, you have to increase my salary. It's either you increase the salary or I walk a... All right. So remember, you now come from 50 million, that was the problem before, to 75 million. From 75 million, because the person has solved problem, he says, what I want now is 90 million and an official car, and you will pay my children's school. So the margin that was at 7% that you were trying to manage before suddenly goes from that 7% to what? No, it goes to 3%. It goes further down, right? And so my point is that how then do you make the business case? Imagine you go to your CEO and you say, well, the problem is 50 million naira. We can solve it using, cleaner production, but we have to buy solar. Guy looks at you and say, you want me to invest in solar? But What if you go and meet this person and you say that, Oga, we spend 30 million naira monthly on diesel. 30 million times 12 is 360 million naira on diesel. But we know that this diesel price will not stay constant. So I've included a 40 million naira buffer into it. And so this year, we are likely going to spend 400 million naira on diesel. But I found a solution. I found this solar thing that we can invest into. It would cost us 150 million naira. The guy gets excited and says, oh, wait, so we are going to save 250 million naira. You say, no, we will not save 250 million naira. We won't save 250 million naira because solar has a challenge. Any renewable energy has a challenge. The challenge is that it's an intermittent source of power. And so you can't use solar all day long for 24 hours. So we might still need to keep our diesel generator, but we'll be running it only at night. And so we'll still expend another 50 to 75 million naira on diesel. So if you add that 150 million naira to the 75 million, it's 225 million naira. So the actual amount that would likely save is 175 million. But you know what? Let's also still be careful. We shouldn't say it's 175 million because even though we've done the rough estimates today that the solar will cost 150 million, it might take time. So the first 2 months, for example, we might still need to spend on diesel. Let's still factor in a 60 million into this, or let's even say 75 million. So our savings actually is going to be 100 million. But you know the beautiful thing about this is that the solar panels, once we install them, that 150 million upfront cost is a one-time thing. Next year, we will not have to spend this 150 million naira again. That's when you really start seeing the savings. Don't focus on just this year. The savings really, truly kickstarts from next year. But at the minimum, there's a potential for 100 million at a conservative level, this year. If I walk up to you, sir, and I table my matter that way, and I've shown you the risk, so I didn't just say this is a fantastic picture. I keep getting conservative about it, that even though it's 150 million, we still have to spend on diesel. We still have to do, there's a potential that it might take time. I laid the thing down for you that way. Are you more inclined to give me that money or less inclined? You are more inclined. The challenge is that when finance people go to them, there are either two people that will go. Either the chief technology or the engineers will go there and say, there's a solar panel of 30, the nameplate capacity is 30 megawatt, but it will give you something efficiency of, the guy is looking at you and saying, what exactly are you talking about? What's nameplate capacity? What's all these things that you're saying to me? What is the naira and kobo that this thing comes down to? That's on the one hand. If the engineer does not go there, it's the finance person that will go there. The finance person will go there and say, we need 150 million naira now. The guy looks at you and say, I'm already spending 350 million on diesel. You say I should give another 150 million to build solar. The problem is not that they're saying anything different from what I've said. The problem is in the presentation and the way that the business case is made. Don't forget, if you do not take anything away from this, you have to understand that you've got to find a way to prioritize value over values when you're making your business case. Not because values are not important in this context. We're saying emissions reduction, water conservation, and all of those, energy efficiency. It's not because those things are not important. In fact, they're critical. It's because when you put that thing in front, there is the potential for you to get the no. So the first key driver is that costs are rising, and so you've got to package your business case in a way that gets to the heart of either cost reduction or margin improvement. If you simply go there and say that we need to build a solar panel because costs are rising, you still have not gotten the point across. You've got to say it in a way that lowers your production cost or improves your margin or does both. So we want to transition to solar energy or the use of a power-saving equipment. that thing would help us to lead to reduced diesel costs or electricity expense, and improved margins. In fact, you would say that, by the way, I'm being extra conservative about this, my conversation, because you remember that even though we use diesel, we still pay PHCN some money. But when we use solar now, even our PHCN cost will go down. I've intentionally not factored that in so that we keep this very conservative. CEO is doing maths in his head like, okay, this is 200 million that we'll be saving. We want to expand into Kano. Maybe we can use that 200 million. But you as a smart staff, what you will now end it with is that maybe this year we can even pay a good bonus. And your people will be happy. You don't have to send anybody away. We don't need to increase prices of our goods. That's one way. So when we talk about the key driver of RECP, we say one of it is rising costs. One way to make the business case is to say that we are able to keep costs low and improve margins. The second one, I sort of got at it earlier, is that another driver is the pressure to meet environmental compliance. NESRA and all those fantastic bodies will come to us and say water has to be at this level, energy has to be at this level, you are polluting like this. And we gave the example of how, for me personally, like the fine is not the problem. You can pay a fine. The challenge for me is always the reputational risk that you are not costing when you say that it really doesn't matter for us to meet the environmental requirement. There's the potential for a reputational risk that will lead to even increased costs much more than you can bear. There's a company my pension plan used to be invested in the UK. It's I'll not call their name, it's a water authority there, right? So there was an audit that was conducted and they realized that they've got corroded pipes. And the corroded pipe is obviously then getting into the corrosion is getting into the water, and this is the water that the folks in London are drinking. And so it was a massive, thing. What happened was management then came to us and said, listen, okay, you don't catch me. We did not, maintain our pipes and all of those. We need more money we need money, obviously, to fix these pipes. We said, no problem. We're willing to give you the money to fix the pipe, but how do we get the returns for this extra capital that we want to give to you? The conversation became, well, the only way you can get your returns is if we increase the water rates in London. We did the maths. Here's what the water rates have to climb up to. Well, don't forget, water is a highly regulated, because it's an utility, it's highly regulated. They went to the regulators and the regulators said, no, you cannot increase the water rates to this amount. And the investors sat down, because we're not the only ones invested, sat down and we said, we are not in business for charity. If we give you the money, we've got to find a way to bring the returns back to us. If you can't get us the returns that we need, we're fine to write off our investment in the company. In any case, we've been invested in this company for a while. We've extracted value from it anyways. But we're in the business to deliver the pension promise, meaning that every time the pensioners come, we must pay them on time as promised. If we were doing no returns to the other companies, there's no way we'll be paying the pensioners. And unlike a certain country I know, that pensioners can go years without collecting their money. There's a certain country. This country that I live in, and this promise, in fact, we call it the pension promise. And a promise is a promise, and we've got to deliver that promise. Every month, you don't need to ask us. That money has to be in your account. And so we said to the business, ultimately, that you either increase the water rates so that we can get our returns from this, or we'll pull out of the business. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the investors pulled out of this business. The government is now the one grappling with where to look for money to fix this. Where do you think the government will get the money? It's from taxpayers. Meaning that in some sense, that rate will get, this auntie is a genius. That rate will still go up, either through taxes. They will not just call it water bill. They'll call it something else. My point of this story is that this is now, like, if you Google hydro issue in London, you'll see the company I'm talking about. My point is, customers have started thinking about where else to go to. It became a fully blown reputational related issue, not only blowing back on the company, but also investors like ourselves, just because they refused to be compliant with the environmental requirements. Now, the cost of fixing the pipes, imagine they had been fixing it every year. The cost now, or maintaining, I beg your pardon, the cost they are now having to incur today, looking for investors, the investors will price their company low. They would not have to incur those costs if they had just met the environmental requirements. My point, therefore, is the other way to build your business case is to go to Oga and say, listen, you see this cost that we do not want to incur today. When the thing blows up, it might even be tonight, not tomorrow. When the thing blows up, the blowback will be such that what we do not want to pay today will pay through our noses, and there's the potential that our company might even go down. That's the other way to make the business case. But you see, making this business case, you see what I did? I gave you a real example. You don't just go to a guy and say, there's the potential. There is such and such company, this other company that it happened to, and this was what happened ultimately. When you give, and you know Nigerians, we don't like bad news. When you deliver, when you serve the news like this on a platter, garnish it with examples. And we like meat, put big meat of company that went under. Oga will think about it twice. Meaning that sometimes your business case isn't just lower production cost or healthier margins. Your business case is reputational in nature. It's environmental compliance in nature. And you've got to think about the way, like you would start by saying, yeah, there will be a penalty. Here's what the penalty costs. The penalty would even be such and such amount. Maybe, it's 10% of the value, and then would have to pay, interest on it and all of those. That's what the numbers look like. You would have gone to mommy. Mommy would have done those projections for you. But beyond that, here's the cost that we're being blindsided by today, that we are not looking at today. That's even more massive than whatever penalty or fee that would likely pay. The third one, like I said, is growing demand for greener supply chain. The way to build this case is not to just talk about, supply chain. The way to talk about it is to say, listen, such and such, this textile bros, for example, maybe they export into Europe. Do you know that there's a regulation that has just come up in Europe? By the way, you not write it yourself. You're going to meet the compliance team in your company. Help me research this thing properly. Let me know that I'm saying the appropriate thing. There's this thing called CBAM in Europe now, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. How does it impact us? What might the numbers look like? What level is it now? You now say, okay, even though we don't export today, for example, there's the potential for us to export. Here are the companies that are impacted. There's how our company fits in. And so if we produce in a cleaner way, there's a potential for us to expand our production into new markets. Beyond that, you can even say, well, we even export now. We export our products into new markets. But there's the potential for us to start losing revenue. CEO does not want to hear lose revenue. There's the potential for us to start losing revenue because our trading partners are beginning to look for other partners that produce in a clean manner. And remember, this our European trading line is the source of FX for us. And you know how much we get from FX gains. So even if we are not making too much money from them, just by the fact that we now have FX and the gains we'll get from that is massive. Do you want to lose this trading line? And so the market access that it provides and it presents to you is another way to build the case for why you should do RECP and IE projects. The final one, the CFO, mommy, for example, would like this one. Mommy says she wants to come and see ways to do investment. I'm not an investment. I will not teach you how to make investments. We can have a conversation about it. But you know what people usually say whenever they want to give you investment advice, but they are not an investment advisor? They'll say, do not take this as an investment advice. So that if the thing casts tomorrow, like what's that one that just casted recently? CBEX. This is my auntie says CBEX. She did not put money, she just has friends that put money in it. Because immediately I said, what's that thing? She immediately called it CBEX. She knows it. It's close to home. You know? So you know how people will now advise you go and put money in CBEX. If you cast, you now take me. There was one guy that came to do training for us. He was the one that gave me investment advice. This should not be taken as investment advice. In any case, by Saturday, I'll be in one very big plane. You know that thing where they do like this? What's in law? Yeah. It just means that it's JC that will come and deliver the training in September. What's in law? All right. So this other one is access to green finance and competitive advantage. Like we said, listen, make no mistake. Capital is expensive in this part of the world. You go to a bank, they ask you to bring. I heard that they charge as high as 37%. Daddy says it's not true. It's not true. It's much. Daddy says, how are people paying 37%? Their own company, they make enough money that they don't need to go to the bank to borrow money. They make enough money. The point is, capital is expensive. Whenever the CEO or CFO hears about a place to borrow money at a cheaper rate, they would always be willing to listen to the conversation. Now, we said that there are a lot of grants that are out there, international-based grants that are out there. So think about it. BOI is willing to give us money that you ordinarily would have collected at 37%. They're willing to give you that loan for 10%. For 10%. That's a third of your cost of capital. Let me answer that question. Do you think that they paid for my flight from Canada to Nigeria? They will fly me back. They will come again in September just to package you. No, BOI does have, and they would have a conversation with you also. They do have a package under this program to provide loans at 10%. You can take. Let me answer that question. Do you think that they paid for my flight from Canada to Nigeria? They will fly me back. They will come again in September just to package you. People are beginning to be drowsy. And some people are beginning to nod their head like this. So I'll get us to break now. Get tea break. When we come back, it's marathon. You know the way they were speeding on Abuja Airport Road. That's how I will speed now for the rest of the session. All right, so let's go on break. I typically don't break at this point, but I think I'm spending too much time on the slides. So let's break now. Get out, for tea break. And when we come back, it's 170 kilometers per hour.